Welcome to Investing in Comic Books. I'm Terry Hoknes. Today's show we're going to talk about Thor issue 132 from 1966 Marvel Comics. Is it a good investment? We're going to find out as we discuss a whole bunch of pros and cons about this book. Let's start off with looking at the key features of why somebody would collect this book. Well, it's a 1966 Marvel. It's prime from the mid-60s when the Silver Age Marvel was at its peak. Marvel was all the talk and the rage at the new comic conventions that were just becoming popular at that time. Jack Kirby did the artwork on this issue, which is the 7th issue under the title of Thor, as the book had originally been called Journey into Mystery and had just recently changed its title to mark it better for the hero's name. This issue is the first appearance of Ego. And I want to note one special thing about this book. If you look at the census, 451 copies have been graded by CGC, but there are 222 copies graded 9.6 or better. That's an astounding large number for a book from the 1960s. In fact, I think it probably holds the world record. And because of that, I think there must have been a warehouse find of this issue at some point in the last 10 years, because that is a lot of high-grade copies to have turned up. Heritage Auctions has sold 34 copies, all grades combined, which is a decent number, but not a lot. But my main concern is that there's so many high-grade copies out there that have actually been graded CGC, which means there's even more copies out there. Let's look at the Overstreet annual price guide values. If you look in the current 2012 price guide, valued at $165 for a near mint 9.2 copy. And that's just a little bump up from the year before, a $5 increase, $10 increase before that. And of course, 2010 was the big year that all the Marvel Silver Age had a big bump, and it jumped up $30 that year. So what good news we do have here is in the last 5 years, it has actually increased every single year. Small but consistent growth. We also see that with the other mid to high grade copies. But of course, as we get lower grade, we notice that the prices, even though they've moved a little bit, I wouldn't say it's anything to brag about. If you have a low grade copy, say a VG, a 4.0, it has gone up $4 in 5 years. Do I think that's a good investment? Well, you're not even making $1 a year. So in lower grade, I would say no. And keep in mind, I did a search on eBay today. There were 91 copies for sale. That's a pretty common book for that age. It's almost 50 years old. And of course, there's a lot of ungraded high-grade books on eBay as well, of course, as low-grade. And everybody seems to be trying to get full guide. But with 91 copies, it's going to take a long time for those to all sell out. So the idea of this book going up in value much in lower to mid-grade, I think, is going to be pretty hard for that to happen. Of course, only if the high grade copy goes up in value does that affect the lower grade values. So if you're investing in low grade, I would say don't bother. Of course, higher grade books are beautiful. They're always popular. Thor is one of the most collected Marvel titles of the 60s. So for long run, just to own a book, they will be obviously easy to sell. But the trick is, as we're going to look at the census here now from CGC, that there are 59 copies graded 9.8 from the census I'm looking at. That is a lot of high grade copies. So for someone to set a world record sales price at this point, you know, it's not likely a 9.9 will ever show up. So really all we can do is keep bringing out more 9.8s. And 59 copies means this book is definitely not rare. Again, if there was a warehouse find, there could be a lot more copies floating out there. In fact, the CG census is almost full of only high-grade books, which is quite a rarity for a book like this, which is another signal to me that there was a warehouse find and that there's a whole bunch of unread copies just sitting around for many decades, that all of a sudden we've got all these high-grade books. Normally with a comic of this age and popularity, the majority of the graded books would be in the low to mid range, and of course people hoping for high grade, but in this case they're all high grade. So what that does is affect the price that we're going to get. Now let's look at the biggest sales ever at Heritage Auctions. They've had some pretty impressive sales for 9.8 copies. In fact, at 7 100% of guide value. That sounds impressive, but the more important thing I notice is when this occurred. And if you looked at Heritage biggest sales for Thor actually were a decade ago, and that's usually not a good sign. Prices have come down as the market got flooded with copies. You'll see that there are no current sales. Of course, the only thing going for it, again, it is a popular series. Thor is always in demand. All of those high-grade copies have been sold. There are none on eBay in the 9.8 that have been graded by CGC. So that is a good sign that in the future the demand is strong enough that even with that many copies out there, people do want them. My only concern is this really going to help the book go up in value? It's been consistent. Overstreet does not break the book out as a key issue from the other issues. It could happen in the future, but I'm going to say at this point it's not likely to happen. And even if it did, it probably wouldn't make much of a difference. So keep in mind, if people are putting copies up for sale on eBay, you have the competition of pricing your book against everybody else selling. So that is a bad sign. And keep in mind that eBay and PayPal take almost 20% commission. So if you buy this book and it really doesn't go up much at all, and you have competition from other sellers, you're going to have to lower your price to guarantee your sale. You're going to lose % in the commission. So I don't see this as a winning case. Again, if you do have a CGC graded copy, 9.6 or 9.8, you are going to get way over guide. That sounds like a good sign, but that doesn't necessarily mean profit, because you're also going to have to pay that to get the book. So keep that in mind. It's not a rare book. In fact, this might be the most common high-grade Marvel comic of the 1960s. That is also not a good sign. So, summing up a few things, it does feature Jack Kirby artwork. It's a very popular title. It is the 7th issue under the title Thor. And most comics, of course, Thor was probably selling over 100,000 copies a month at that time. So even with that, most issues are gone. Heritage has sold 34 copies over a decade. That's not very many. That's only on average 3 a year. So it's not turning up, but that's also because it's not considered a key issue, and so it's not being brought out to attention very often. So there's some pros and cons of investing in this book. So I would consider that you ask yourself, how long do you plan to hold this book if you're buying it for investment to make some money? If you're going to do it for short term, I think you really need to find a deal on eBay where you try to get the book at half guide and hope. But even then, if it's a low grade copy, it's so cheap anyway, it's really not going to do you much good to try to buy a $5 book and try to make money on it, because the book is almost 50 years old, and if a low grade copy is still only $10 now, it's not moving anywhere very quickly in the future. If you would like to learn about this book or other books in this series or any other comic books in that matter, we publish a series of books called Investing in Comic Books. You can check out them all at our website, hawknescomics.com. Glad to answer any of your questions at hawknes@hotmail.com. If you would like to see me create a video about one specific comic book that you're thinking of investing in, drop me a line and I'll see if I can put up a video for you special. We appreciate your support. If you could check out our books, they're a lot of fun to read. You will learn a lot about the comics, and you'll get a new perspective of having all this data collected together. So once again, that's Investing in Comic Books. My name's Terry Hoknes. Thanks for watching this video.